The restaurant hummed with quiet elegance. Crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow across polished marble floors, and the soft murmur of conversation blended with the clink of silverware against porcelain. It was a place where luxury wasn't just expected, it was demanded. But in the midst of the refined atmosphere, a single, cruel laugh cut through the air. Still a waiter? Pathetic. The voice belonged to Daniel Miller, a young man draped in an expensive tailored suit, his blonde hair slicked back with precision. His words, sharp and dismissive, were directed at Elias Thompson, an elderly waiter with graying hair and a face etched by years of dedication. Elias stood holding a tray with practiced grace, though his hands trembled slightly under the weight, not of the porcelain cups, but of the humiliation. Little did Daniel know, that night would mark the beginning of a lesson he would never forget. Hey, before we get to the shocking twist of this story, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. We bring powerful stories like this every week, stories that make you think, feel, and maybe even change the way you see the world. Now, let's get back to what happened next. Elias lowered his eyes, giving a slight nod as he placed the tray on the table beside Daniel. The waiter's posture remained dignified, but the hurt was undeniable. Daniel leaned back, laughing again. His friends at the table, equally dressed in designer clothes, chuckled along, more out of habit than genuine amusement. Come on, Daniel continued, gesturing toward Elias. You're, what? 70? Still running around serving tables? Shouldn't you be? I don't know, retired or something? Elias's lips pressed into a thin line, though he said nothing. The table next to them glanced over in discomfort. The restaurant staff, watching from a distance, shifted uneasily but knew better than to interfere. Daniel Miller was the son of one of their wealthiest regulars, a name that opened doors and closed mouths. Daniel's laughter echoed through the room again. I mean, seriously, how pathetic can it get? Elias gave a soft sigh and turned away, returning to the kitchen. His steps were measured, his pride bruised but intact. In the corner of the restaurant, a man had been quietly observing the entire scene. He wore a dark suit and sat alone, stirring a cup of espresso. His gaze followed Elias as he disappeared behind the kitchen doors, then shifted to Daniel, who was now recounting the hilarious interaction to his friends. The man placed a napkin on the table, stood up, and walked toward the kitchen. Inside, Elias was meticulously stacking plates, his eyes unfocused. The man stepped beside him. Mr. Thompson? Elias turned, surprised. Yes? The man extended his hand. Richard Collins. I just wanted to say. I admire your professionalism out there. Most people wouldn't have kept their composure. Elias smiled faintly, shaking the man's hand. Thank you, sir. After so many years, you learn that dignity is something no one can take from you, unless you let them. Richard nodded. Indeed. But I have a feeling tonight's lesson isn't over yet. Meanwhile, Daniel was on his third glass of wine, his laughter growing louder by the minute. His friends had grown bored, scrolling through their phones or glancing at their watches. Suddenly, the restaurant manager approached the table with a tight smile. Mr. Miller, we have a special guest who'd like a word with you. Daniel arched an eyebrow. Me? A guest? Who? The manager simply gestured toward the far side of the restaurant, where the man in the dark suit now stood. Intrigued, Daniel got up and swaggered over. Richard extended a hand. Mr. Miller, good evening. I'm Richard Collins, owner of this restaurant. Daniel's cocky expression faltered slightly. Oh, nice to meet you, sir. Richard smiled politely. The pleasure is mine. I was just intrigued by your comments about Mr. Thompson earlier. Daniel's grin returned. Oh, the old waiter? Yeah, well, it was just a joke. I mean, Come on, who works as a waiter at his age? Richard's smile faded. Someone who helped build this very restaurant from the ground up. Elias Thompson isn't just a waiter. He was my mentor when I started in the hospitality business 25 years ago. He taught me everything I know about integrity, respect, and hard work. In fact, this restaurant wouldn't exist without him. Daniel's smirk vanished. Wait, he's your mentor? Richard's eyes turned cold. Yes. And tonight, you publicly mocked the man who laid the foundation for the success you so casually enjoy. You see, Mr. Miller, money can buy a lot of things, but not dignity, not respect, and certainly not character. Daniel's face turned pale. His friends, still seated across the room, whispered among themselves as the realization spread. I didn't know, Daniel stammered. That's the problem, Richard said softly. You never thought to know. The next day, Daniel returned to the restaurant alone. The usual arrogance was gone. Instead, he stood nervously at the entrance. Elias was wiping down a table near the window when Daniel approached. Mr. Thompson? Elias looked up, surprise flickering in his eyes. I wanted to say I'm sorry, Daniel began, voice low. What I said yesterday, it was cruel. I was trying to impress my friends, but I crossed a line. Elias studied him for a moment, then gave a small nod. It takes courage to admit when we're wrong, he said quietly. I accept your apology. Daniel hesitated, then extended his hand. Elias looked at it for a moment before shaking it firmly. Would you mind, Daniel added, telling me more about how you built this place? I think I have a lot to learn. Elias smiled softly, gesturing toward a nearby chair. Well, it all started 30 years ago, with a dream and a lot of hard work. Life has a way of teaching us lessons when we least expect it. Daniel thought he was mocking a simple waiter, but he was actually belittling the man who laid the foundation for success. Respect is not about status or wealth, it's about recognizing the dignity in every person, regardless of their job or appearance. If you enjoyed this story and believe in the power of respect and humility, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Who knows? The next story might just change your perspective too.